Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be reviewing the Neato Botvac Connected D4. Now I really hope this review is helpful for you if you're new to robot vacuums or if you've been in them for a while. Just to be upfront, I've had the D4 for about 2 months now. I've had Neatos for about 5 years, but this one for only 2 months. I'm probably not going to do a bunch of videos kind of letting you know how it goes. I might do one in 6 months or a year. But if you want more real-time feedback on how the robot is doing, you can check me out on Instagram. I'll put that down here at the bottom. I usually update that with really anything that I'm doing pretty regularly. So if you want to keep up, check that out. So let me start out by giving you some specs of this robot vacuum so that when you're in the market, you can go and compare kind of line by line what the D4 has versus what else is out there. The first thing I want to tell you about is that there's 2 main types of robot vacuums. One, they'll use a laser, a lidar unit, a 2D lidar unit, which is essentially a laser radar, and that's how it's going to map and navigate, as well as bump sensors as well, so it can kind of nudge into things. The other camp of robot vacuums uses a vslam system, V-S-L-A-M, and that essentially is just using a camera, and it is visually looking around, and that's how it's doing its navigation. The main difference that I've seen is that right now, LiDAR is a bit more accurate and works with no lights on. So if you're not home and you didn't leave lights on and the sun goes down, your vacuum can run just fine. If you're using the vslam, which has a camera, then you might be out of luck. There are some units that have their own lights on board so it can illuminate a dark room, but I just want to kind of give you that those are the 2 main different types of robot vacuums out there today. Now, there are 1 or 2 companies that's starting to do a combination of both, but from my research right now, LiDAR seems to be much more accurate and again works in dark rooms, and the vslam not so much. But what I will say is going forward, I think vslam has more of a higher ceiling versus the LiDAR, and that's just because you're getting so much data from that image sensor. You might be able to program in algorithms that understand what clothes are or what maybe a cord is or something like that. So the robot could make a decision on its own. Hey, that looks like an extension cord. I'm not going to roll over it because it's going to get caught in my brush. And LiDAR, you're just not going to get that. But right now, in my opinion, I think that LiDAR is better, which is why I've gone with the Neato Robotics D series. So I started out 5 years ago, and it was a pretty good robot vacuum. The one comment that I will make is definitely get the warranty if you're going to get a Neato. I'm just going to say that first and foremost so that you know. It has a 1 year, but I would highly suggest that wherever you get it from, you go ahead and extend that out because these things are not that cheap and they have a tendency to have issues. So I just want to get that out there. I have had plenty of issues. Neato's been great about them. I've mailed it off, they've fixed it, or they've sent me a brand new unit, no problem. I've probably done that 2 or 3 times in the past 5 years. So I am going to suggest that if you go with Neato, you need to get the plan just so that you're covered. I purchased through Best Buy. I'm covered for 1 year with the Neato, and then I have an additional 2 years under Best Buy, and that has been absolutely great so far. All right, so let's start out with some specs of the Neato D4. Now, the 3 things that I really care about when it comes to robot vacuums are the bin size for vacuums that don't automatically empty their own bin, the noise level, and then the suction power of that vacuum, which is really going to dominate how well it can pick up. So the bin size on the D4 is 700 milliliters or about 3 cups. It is one of the larger bins on the market. If you're running the vacuum every day, I think 3 cups should get you through 1 house cleaning if your house is around 2,000 square feet or so, I guess depending on how many animals you have. Now, the way that Roomba has gotten around this is that they have models now that empty their own bin, so it can go for a little while, come back to the base, empty itself. Neato does not have that yet. I look forward to that in the future, getting there. I think that's absolutely wonderful, but Neato doesn't have that right now, so you're working with about 3 cups of bin size. So the D4, as well as the 5, 6, and 7, all have the same motor, and they all have 2 modes. You're going to have eco mode and turbo mode. Now, the D4 and turbo mode is going to get much less battery life than eco mode, and in eco mode, it's going to run for 75 minutes, which doesn't really matter to me because I'm running it while I'm at work. I don't care how many times it has to go back and charge. Now, if you're going to be home, that might matter to you. So running it in eco mode, you'll get about 75 minutes. I run mine in turbo every time, and it probably gets like about 30 minutes or so, and then it goes back and charges and then picks right back up. Now, the important thing is, what is the CFM? How much suction is it actually getting in those two modes? And on the low setting, being eco mode, it is 17 CFM. And then on turbo mode, it is 20 CFM. Now, just for comparison, the Roomba i7 Plus tops out at 17 CFM. So you can see, even in eco mode, the Neato is very effective. Now, as far as noise, the D4 comes in about 64 decibels. Now, outside of those three features, let's start talking about some of the other features of the Neato. And one of the most incredible things that they've added is no-go lines. So you can go into your floor plan that's mapped with the laser, and you can actually mark on the floor plan where you don't want the robot to go. Now, it will have to get the floor plan first, so kind of that first run, I would suggest doing in eco mode so that it can just get more ground, cover more ground. And that's when you're gonna have to make sure that certain doors are closed, that your cords are kind of put away so that it can't actually get tripped up. And once it completes that run, you'll then have a floor plan that you can go in and mark up. And I have to say, this is absolutely the best feature and the best thing about the Neato. I know others have it as well, but Neato was the first one to implement it, and it is a lifesaver. So I've gone in and I've marked all the spots where the Neato would get kind of hung up in the past, and now it really has no issues. So my old Neatos, I would come home, they might be stuck. I would say they probably had a 30 to 40% success rate as far as starting it, cleaning the entire house, and making it back to the base. And what we'd have to make sure every morning before we left for work is that maybe the bathroom door is closed, or there's a room that has a threshold that's too big. You would just have to make sure that everything was set up properly for the robot. And that is totally gone. That's a thing of the past. Now you just use the no-go lines. All my doors are open. It doesn't matter if I remembered or didn't remember. I only kind of have to remember to pick up maybe a shirt or something off of the floor. But other than that, this robot has amazing success. So out of the last 20 runs that it's done more than that, but I think the app might only save the last 20. It got hung up 3 times, and one of those was my fault. So it has about a 90% success rate as far as getting my whole house cleaned and making it back to the base with no issues. I get home, I empty the bin, I vacuum the filter, and it's good to go for the next day. So one of the things that Neato charges more for in the higher end models is that you can have multiple floor plans. So if you have a multi-level house, you could save multiple floor plans, first floor, second floor, and so on. And also you can do like individual room cleaning. Now, I kind of have cheated to get around that, and I just use the no-go lines. So for instance, there's certain rooms in my house that we just don't use all that often, and they don't need to be vacuumed every day. And instead of remembering to close a door or something like that, I'll just go and add a no-go line across the threshold of the door, and then the robot won't go in there that day to clean it. So that's kind of my way of gaming the system a little bit, but it's very effective and works well. But this model will not save multiple floor plans. So if you have a multi-level home, it's only going to be able to save one. Another thing to touch on is that this robot will map the room, and then it runs a path. So a few years ago, robots used to kind of bounce around randomly, and that was very inefficient. Now, they would get everything covered eventually, but this was kind of the first of its kind in pioneering that, and now other robots have caught up. But this one will scan the room, it'll run the perimeter of the room, and then it'll just run a path back and forth until the entire room is covered. Once the battery dies, I alluded to this earlier, it'll return to its base, it'll charge, and then it'll resume right where it left off. Most robot vacuums do that as well these days. It does also have a drop sensor, so it shouldn't fall down the stairs or anything like that. I don't have a multi-level house, so I haven't had really any experience with that. But one thing that I will say is that the Neato seems to be one of the robot vacuums that has a higher wheel clearance. It can get up above thresholds of 3/4 inches or so. which that seems to be one of the highest ones on the market. Others are a little lower to the ground, so they actually can only go about 1/2 inch or so. So Neato can get all the way over a 3/4 inch threshold. The other thing that's a little obvious is that the Neato is D-shaped, so having that square front, it can really get into corners very well. The D4 does not have a side brush, but I haven't seen it actually miss that much. Now I do have extra care mode enabled because I don't really want it banging into things. Some of the previous versions were a little more rough on like chair legs and corners of walls and things like that. So I'm using the extra care mode. I haven't had any issues with it scuffing anything or messing anything up, but I think that D shape is very effective. Another thing to point out with that D-shaped design is that the brush is 11 inches. So you're getting 11 inches of coverage and the robot overlaps each pass that it does. So let's go over some of the cons now because we talked about the pros and just kind of general robot vacuum stuff. The cons of the Neato D4 really are just that you don't get the no-go lines when you schedule the robot. You have to manually start it from the app in order to enable those no-go lines. That is a bummer. It's not the end of the world, and I've kind of gotten into a routine of just when I leave for work, I'll start it and I'm good to go. But it would be nice if you could have the schedule run the robot with the no-go lines enabled. The other thing would be the cost. The suggested retail cost is $529. I got mine for $400. I've actually seen online now that it's down about $320 or so. I think at that price, it is a great purchase. I'll put links in the description below if you want to check it out on Amazon or some other website. But other than that, I really don't have many bad things to say about this. It's been absolutely great for us. If you have pets like we do, we have 2 dogs that shed quite a bit. Having this thing run while we're gone every day and coming home to a clean floor is absolutely incredible. We love it, and like I said, we're getting 90% of the time that this thing runs, it's returning to base, it's full. We'll empty it out and we're good to go for the next day. It has been a huge, huge help around our house. Now, I do want to point out that it's not a 100% replacement for a vacuum. Like I said, I'm using no-go lines, so by nature, there are areas that the vacuum is not going and is not getting. Those spaces, we still have to manually vacuum, which is really no big deal. We do them about once a week. Also, I want to shout out Vacuum Wars. They were so helpful when I was doing my research. They have tons of information out there, tons of videos comparing almost any model of robot vacuum and regular vacuum under the sun on YouTube as well as on their website. So go check them out. I'll link them either up here or in the description below. But what they have going on is awesome. I hope this kind of best and worst of the Neato Botvac Connected D4 was helpful for you in your search for a robot vacuum. As always, thank you so much for watching Break It Yourself. Don't forget to thumbs me up, and we'll see you next time.